Hello everyone. Yes indeed, Daniel King is having a rest today for his PowerPlayChess. And it's me, Yannick Pelletier, Swiss Grandmaster, who replaces him. And today we're gonna follow up, of course, with the Magnus Carlsen Invitational Day 11, Round 6, first part of the Round 6 with two matches. There was a top match, of course. We are going to make a highlight of this top match, taking a game of it. The second match of the day was Giri against Fiorusia. The tail enders of the tournament, of course, high rated and great players, but having a tough time in this tournament, even though Giri beat Carlsen in the past round, in the fifth round, and Fiorusia had lost all his matches so far. Well, today he managed to beat Giri in that match. But of course we are going to focus on the match of Magnus Carlsen against Nepomniachtchi. It's of course the star match of the day. I mean, there are great players, there are great matches every day, but clearly Carlsen, Nepomniachtchi stands out. Nepomniachtchi is one of the only players at the top who has a positive score against Carlsen, albeit some of his wins were scored when they were teenagers, youngsters. Yet he remains a difficult opponent for Carlsen, and well, of course, it was going to be a tough match. We are going to take a look at one of the 4 games of this match. One of the 5 games of this match, but I won't reveal too much. It's going to be round 3, so the third game of the rapid match. Let's recap what happened. In the first game of the match, Carlsen, playing white, lost against Nepomniachtchi. He played the very same idea as he did against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, a strange idea in the Sicilian. Clearly Nepomniachtchi was prepared, he refuted it and won easily with black. In the second game, Nepomniachtchi with white got an advantage, quite a clear advantage, but did not manage to follow through with the attack. It's even Carlsen who had chances to win in the end, and he missed chance actually in a winning position. That game ended in a draw. So before the third game, Nepomniachtchi is leading 1.5 to half. This is the last game theoretically in the match where Carlsen has white, so he needs to do something, and he doesn't play e4 as in the first game. He goes for d4, knight f6, and bishop f4. The London system, which he's been playing often, both in Blitz, Rapid, and also sometimes in classical games. It's a system he uses in order to get just a normal position. He knows he's going to be able to develop his pieces normally and reach a normal position, hoping that he might outplay his opponent later on in the middle game, and who knows, perhaps in the end game. Well, this game, we'll see, is a slight exception because he didn't manage to get the easy development that white can usually get in the London, and that's also Nepomniachtchi's fault because he went for a very daring, risky system, c5. It's not it doesn't really have a great reputation against the London because white can play d5 and reach some sort of Benoni-Schmidt-Benoni pawn structure. Benoni would be c4. Well, here he plays knight c3, which is basically an improvement compared to the normal Benoni a6, a4. And Nepomniachtchi plays e5. I mean, there were options here. He could go g6. He could go perhaps g6, or he could go, if he wanted to create some tension in the center, e6. Well, then e4 would follow. I mean, there were many options, but he decided to go for e5. White wouldn't really like to take en passant on e6, so he should move the bishop. The question is, where does he move the bishop? Well, the thing is, white next move after moving the bishop would be e2, e4, followed by knight f3, knight d2, knight c4. Clearly this knight g1 in this structure wants to go to c4. This is its ideal square, where it can hit d6, control b6, a5, many crucial squares. On the other hand, as we can guess, after a bishop move, black is probably not going to allow e2, e4. He's going to play e5, e4 himself. And so we need to understand which is the best setup for white, where to put the bishop. Bishop g5 seems to be normal, but I like Carlsen's idea to play just bishop d2. Now, of course, the bishop stands a bit in the way, in the path of the knight going to c4, but we keep in mind that black really doesn't want to allow e4, and so he's going to play e4 himself. And thus, he now wants to get back the bishop to g5 or f4. Well, first he actually plays h3, which is positionally, it's a clever move. It's a non-committal move, really. He controls g4, and I think he just wants to prepare to put the bishop on this diagonal, h2, well, d6, because it's going to hit the pawn on d6. Bishop g5 might be tempting as well, generally speaking, but h3 makes sense just to get the bishop there and gain some space and access to a few key squares. h5 played by black to prevent g4. Probably that was not the main aim, but he wants to take some space on the king side. It seems to be a natural move, but perhaps there was better to do. In any case, white played bishop f4. I mean, bishop g5 again would have been an interesting option, but clearly for Carlsen, it's about what does he want to get? What kind of plan does he have? The piece placement, piece configuration is going to play a big part, and this bishop clearly belongs on this diagonal to exert pressure against d6. Bishop f5 developing, e3, knight bd7. And now that he's played e4, the question is how to develop those two pieces, the bishop on f1 and the knight on e2. Well, actually, if you're watching this, you can actually push the pause, the break button, and ask yourself, how do I want to put these two pieces? Where should I develop them? Because the obvious choice would be to play bishop c4, then knight to e2, castle short, and then see what happens. That's basically the lazy option. And, well, Magnus Carlsen sometimes is a bit... he feels he follows his instinct, so that could be called laziness, but actually he also works really hard on the board, and he knows what he wants to get. And that's already a few moves back when I mentioned that the ideal square for this knight, g1, is the square c4. And that's where he's going to bring that knight, though not via f3, because of course it's controlled, but via another path. So he wants to play knight from g1 to e2, c1, b3, and only then d2, after which he can reach c4. It will cost time, but it's not that important because the position is rather blocked, closed, and in this case, the time factor is less important. Well, before actually developing any of these pieces, he decided to play a5. It's also an important positional move, just to block this pawn, secure perhaps a square on b6 later on. And again, black doesn't really have any active move to play. He went h4, knight ge2, knight e5, knight c1, knight fd7. I mean, so far Nepomniachtchi is doing a good job, but after knight b3, here clearly the Russian should have posed perhaps. I mean, he didn't spend too much time on his next move, and he should have wondered what does white really want to do. And clearly that's knight d2, hitting e4 of course, but also eyeing to c4. And if wondering, I mean, the attack on the e4, which black is going to achieve with knight d2, is not the only problem for black. And therefore, the best idea would have been to go queen f6, knight d2, and now queen g6. Not only protecting e4, but also keeping an eye on g2, thus preventing the development of the bishop f1. You're not stopping knight c4, but at least you make sure that white does not manage to complete his development freely. So white needs to find a solution in order to bring all his pieces into the game. Well, to be fair, there is a maneuver here for white which secures an edge, but it's a very difficult one. You may be tempted to just castle queenside by going queen e2, bishop e7 and castle. This seems to be natural, and at some point you're going to play g4 perhaps, or g3. But here white is faced with a problem, that's bishop d8 hitting a5. And it's not that easy. I mean, this position now is pretty unclear with this attack on this pawn a5, which white certainly doesn't want to give up. But in order to prevent that, in a way, there is this very subtle maneuver, queen b1, bishop e7, queen a2. You may wonder, what's the queen doing there? Well, it simply prevents the idea of bishop d8. It's just overprotecting a5, and after castle you just castle. Now a5 is protected. If white, if black goes b6 or b5, just gonna take it. It's no problem. And clearly now white would like to go g4 or g3 and open the king side in order to start an attack. This actually looks very promising for white, but I'm not sure Carlsen would have been able to find this queen b1, which I didn't find myself. It was suggested by the engine, but I have to admit I'm impressed, and it's a very nice idea. Nepomniachtchi went bishop g6, knight d2, f5, and now of course you're not going to play knight c4 so easily because the knight will be exchanged, but this is one of Carlsen's real strength. It just senses where to play, how to play, the timing and the placement, f3 just right. He wants to take this pawn on e4, and I don't think black really wants to give it up. He doesn't even have to take it. He can take once and just play bishop e2 and castle first, and this pawn on e4 is going to be doomed in the long run. So clearly he should take ef, gf as happened in the game. But now bishop h5, rook g1. You can see what how black struggles on the g file. This g7 pawn is a backward pawn. We have nice squares like g5, and it's pretty difficult for black to develop his play now. He can't play bishop e7, so maybe a move like g6 would have been sensible in order to try to get bishop g7, maybe even bishop h6. Well, instead of that he went knight f7 to have full control of square g5, but this allows bishop e2, queen f6 and knight c4. Eventually Carlsen managed to get his knight to its ideal square c4. g6, bishop h2. He wasn't really forced to go back with the bishop, but he has an idea in mind. Knight de5, knight b6, rook d8, f4, chasing the knight away, back to d7, bishop takes h5, rook takes h5, knight to c4. Now this knight on c4 is absolutely secure. We've even exchanged light squared bishops, which is generally favorable for white. He has basically, without this light squared bishop, black cannot really get any counterplay in order to try to exchange this knight on c4 or put pressure against d5 or just have any sort of action on the light squares. Basically what we can say here is that white almost has an ideal position. He obviously will move his queen, castle long. There remains just some slight problems. That this bishop on h2 has been blocked. Its diagonal has been blocked by the pawn on f4. And let's see how Carlsen solves this problem. He went after bishop g7, queen d3, king f8, castle long, rook e8, everything logical, rook g2. Well, that's also a very natural move. You're ready to double rooks on the g file, or perhaps, and that's certainly more interesting for white, on the e file, because as I mentioned just a while ago, this bishop on h2 is a problematic piece for white, not playing at all at the moment, being blocked by f4. And clearly that's the priority for white, and Carlsen, as usual, he feels such things. King g8, and now he goes e4. Rook g2, so now he's ready just to shift rooks wherever is needed as quickly as possible. e4, well, black has to take that. Knight e4, queen e7, and rook e1. There is a big threat. Knight f6 check, and the action on the e file would cost black an exchange. He needs to prevent this check. That's what he does with king h8. Now there is no check anymore, but of course g6 has been hanging for a while after the black queen went away. So rook takes g6, and white has won a pawn, ready to play f5 any moment just to open the bishop. And black is already kind of lost here. Of course, he wouldn't resign at once. He has to fight. Knight f6. Here a strong move by Carlsen again. Queen c3. Look, he's putting the queen into this diagonal of the bishop, but this bishop on g7 is a very loose piece. Actually, there are mating ideas all over the place. So, well, Nepomniachtchi hanging on with rook h7, and now queen f3. And this knight on e4 is not really hanging. Knight takes e4, rook e6, hitting the queen and winning back the knight on e4 with just an overwhelming position. In case of rook h6, perhaps the most resilient move, then white just moves back to g2, ready to go to e2, and then the pressure over the e file would be just too strong. White is winning here as well. And Nepomniachtchi decided to take on d5, f5. Finally this bishop is playing, hitting d6. So now you can see all white pieces just full action all over the board, with threats against the king, against weak spots like d6. Everything is just loose in black's position. Everything is just coordinated in white's position. He goes back to f6. Bishop takes d6, queen d8. Well, here Carlsen actually took a practical decision to give up two pieces, two light pieces for a rook, in order to get technically winning position. I'm not going to say endgame yet, but a winning position. The computer doesn't really like white's idea. He prefers just to play queen f4, sorry, to have everything protected. Of course, well, it's winning. When you're a computer, you easily see that bishop h6 isn't good. For the human eye, it's not that easy. I mean, you need to see, okay, rook takes h6 is obviously forced, but then after knight takes h6, you're exchange down. Well, bishop e5, and white's going to be winning, but it's not all easy to understand and see so quickly. I mean, this is a rapid game after all. And rook takes h6, just knight e5, and here as well, for some reason, white is completely winning. Well, what he did is just king b1, so going out of the diagonal. Rook takes e4, rook takes e4, knight takes d6. Knight takes d6, queen takes d6. Rook e6, queen f8, and queen b7. Clearly, when he went king b1, Carlsen had this in mind. He has two pawns, so he has rook and two pawns for knight and bishop. Already materially speaking, this is advantage for white. We usually say that rook and a pawn are equal to bishop and knight. Of course, depending on some other factors, but basically that's the guideline. So here white already has two pawns. a6 is hanging, and look at black's pieces. I mean, the rook on h7 completely tied, passive. The bishop on g7, well, could be strong at some point, but at the time certainly not. The queen on f8, quite passive as well. White's pieces are all active. Knight g8, going back to e4, he could have taken a6, but okay, he prefers protecting f5. Queen f7, rook e8, and everything is tied, no activity for black. So that's clearly what Carlsen more or less sensed, that he's completely tying down his opponent. Rook h6, takes, queen e6, and now White's main goal is basically to try and exchange queens. And he's going to succeed very soon. I mean, king g7, if queen here, he can just take on g8. And that's the basic problem for black, just over. So he needs to exchange queens, and now black has no counterplay, and the 2 pawns are just going to be too strong. Actually, these are not 2 pawns, because after rook e6, he's losing a6. And this is technically completely lost. And Magnus Carlsen just had to play a few more moves in order to convert his advantage. As we can see here, he's already forced black to give up a piece for the a pawn. Now he's an exchange up and the pawn, and obviously here it's all over, and Nepomniachtchi resigned. Very nice performance, but that's actually Carlsen's strength. He went for a very solid opening, although I have to say that Nepomniachtchi contributed in it becoming pretty lively, and Carlsen, just his mental strength when he has to play for a win, whatever the situation. I mean, he's just present, and he rarely disappoints. Later on in the match, the 4th game, when Nepomniachtchi was white, was much more, let's say, quiet and ended in a draw, so that the match ended 2-2, and Carlsen decided the Armageddon Blitz in his favor. He was white, he had to win at any cost, and he managed to grind down the full point in an endgame, which seemed to be drawish at first. So Carlsen, thanks to these 2 points gained in that match against Nepomniachtchi, is in the lead again. But of course, nothing is clear, and his rivals can play tomorrow. Dingleren, Caruana, and others are there. So Nakamura, of course. So they're all going to be in action tomorrow, and well, the action is very high in this event. So we'll see what happens in this preliminary round, and stay tuned. I'll be back one of those days to entertain you again. So hopefully you like the show, and thank you very much for your attention.